He then offers me a glass of extremely strong peppermint water, and he starts quizzing me on my own views. Specifically, he wants to know whether I believe in the Paracelsian or the Helmontian vision of alchemy. And unfortunately, I couldn't remember which was which. It's very important to do your research properly before you go back, otherwise you get into all sorts of trouble. But luckily there are ways of dealing with this. Whenever anybody asks me a tricky question that I can't answer because I'm from the wrong century, I usually play safe and pretend to be Swedish, right? This is incredibly reliable because nobody ever knows what's going on in Sweden. So you just use Sweden as a kind of code word for the 21st century. It's got me out of all sorts of problems. Like it's explaining why I'm wearing a modern dress or what this thing here is, you know, all that kind of thing. So I have a bit of a think about it, and I say to him, in Sweden, well, we also believe in elements of atomic material, but ours are different. There are 4 main elements involved in fermentation. We call them carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And he's a bit thrown by this, and he says, why is some of it in Greek and some of it in Latin? And I say, well, we've been working on this in Sweden for a while now, and maybe it's got a bit more confused than it needs to be, but it's just that the names aren't important. It's a good system. So I try to explain that fermenting vegetable matter is a big mass of all these different types of elements, and that the alcoholic spirit forms as sort of clumps of atoms organised in a particular way. So you have 2 carbon atoms linked together. Okay, those of you who are chemists, you all know this. You've got the 2 carbon atoms linked together with the hydrogen atoms clustered around the sides. And then you've got one oxygen atom sticking out at an angle with another hydrogen on it. And I actually drew him a little picture, which I brought back with me. It's, I don't know if you can see this, but that's the picture that I drew for him of the ethanol molecule, as we call it in modern language, and he's really a bit thrown by this. And he says to me, "This structure, okay, we've got spirit in front of us. Can you show me the structure in the drink?" And I say, "No, you can't do any of that. It doesn't work like that." Because the atoms are very small. In fact, they're so small, you can't see them with the naked eye. And he says, well, that's no problem, because the local vicar has just taken delivery of one of those new microscopes from an instrument maker in the city. So let's pop down to his house, and you can show me the little atoms in the spirit there. And I say, I'm beginning to wonder if this was a good idea. I say, no. That microscope is not going to be good enough. And he says, how do you know that? You've not seen it. And I said, well, it just won't. They're really very, very, very small. They're smaller than any microscope can detect. And by now he's obviously convinced that I'm just making it up as I go along. And he also, it's quite unfortunate, I hadn't noticed this, he also points out that this structure that I've drawn for him resembles nothing so much as a child's drawing of a little dog. Okay? So he thinks I'm wasting his time, basically, this alchemist. And he then says to me, Brother James, has anyone ever actually seen this shape, using a microscope or not? And I say, well, it's complicated. There are actually microscopes that can show atoms, but I don't think the shape was worked out like that. I think that modern people, Swedish people, worked out these things from, like the angles, from studying the shapes of crystals and stuff like that. And he says, crystals, what, crystals of alcohol? And I say, no, not crystals of alcohol, crystals of other stuff. And then they work, it's complicated, I said. And he's basically given up on me, but he asked me if I really think that alcohol is made out of these little round balls. And I say, no, it's not really, they're not really like that. They're sort of fuzzy probability density things. And he says to me, well, if they're fuzzy probability density things, as you describe them, then what the hell is the diagram about? And I say, well, the diagram is symbolic. And at that point, he does his nut. And he says, he's clearly regretting giving me all that peppermint water. And he says, symbols, right, proper symbols are things that we use, right? Things like serpents and brides and dragons, things that you get in proper, respectable alchemical texts. Those symbols have got 3,000 years of use behind them. They're things people can relate to when you're trying to explain something. You could have chosen a serpent, you could have chosen a bride, you could have chosen any symbol in the world. What you've chosen is something that looks like bits of a broken abacus, bent round and shaped into a little dot.